So there's a very fascinating podcast I think every wrestling fan needs to go listen to and kind of make it their priority to put it on their listening list for some point this week. As Marc Maron, the stand-up comedian and actor who was in Glow, wrestling fans might know him from that. And he has a very famous podcast called WTF where he has several celebrities on. He is one of the biggest podcasts in the world, and he's got a very eclectic, wide range of listeners that are not wrestling fans. But you know how this wrestling world works, man. People that love it fucking love it, and they come in all shapes, sizes, and places. And Marc Maron's producer, longtime producer since back in the radio days, apparently is a giant Marc, like the Markiest of Marcs, like all of us, like knows all the details and shit, you know, and can quote you the stuff. So he's a big fan, and he is more of an AEW guy than a WWE guy. And they kind of came up with this idea, long story short, for Marc Maron to learn something new, to discover something new, for him to find other things out in the world that maybe he hasn't been open to before. And he was part of this Glow show, but he never really took the time to learn much about pro wrestling. He's interviewed wrestlers before, but never really thought more about wrestling than it was this fake fighting shit, right? That's what most people outside of our little wrestling bubble universe think of when they think of wrestling. That's why like a Joe Rogan is so dismissive of it. As much as he knows and likes and respects wrestlers, and he gets that these guys are tough and stuff, but at the end of the day, he fundamentally looks at it as fake fighting bullshit. Where UFC's real. Why would you watch the fake stuff? Like the brain does not comprehend what wrestling actually is. And that's why this podcast with Marc Maron was so important, because his producer and Marc kind of came up with this idea to teach Marc the business of pro wrestling as a fan, and not just like as a fan, like, oh, you know, this is fake fighting and this is what they do. But he kind of took him inside, deep dive, the psychology of wrestling, the why behind the what, the showbiz aspects of it, the characters, the personalities, and all of that. And as part of this podcast, Marc Maron was invited to be backstage at the Dynamite that was recently in LA. And he did a series of interviews with professional wrestlers and Tony Khan as well. So I'm going to play you a couple clips of those, and we're going to kind of analyze each of them in order here. I want to walk you through this. And I'm only going to play a little bit of it because I really want you to go check this out, because it's endlessly fascinating watching somebody that's not a wrestling fan learn the business, like really learn it, go deep into it, and get that appreciation for it. Check out this first clip with Chris Jericho talking with Marc Maron about the wrestling business.
Before watching it with Brendan, it wasn't that I judged it, because I talked to a lot of wrestlers. I understand that it's an art, and that it's a performative art.
Right.
But like, I didn't really believe that I'd necessarily get past the knowing that it's not really about whether it has to be convincing.
Sure, it has to be good.
Yeah, but you know that there's an orchestration of moves. Yeah. But like, it very quickly just became about, I became invested in the characters.
Well, and you'll see, like, for example, tomorrow night, my gang, the Jericho Appreciation Society.
Yeah.
I had a match against this up and coming guy, Ricky Starks, who's getting really popular with the crowd. He beat me, and then after he beat me, my gang kicked the shit out of him and threw him through a table and really kicked his ass, right?
Oh, yeah.
So tomorrow night, we're going to come out to gloat about how great we are.
So you guys are the heels?
We're the heels.
Yeah.
And then Ricky will come out, and Action Andretti will come out, and there'll be a little confrontation, which will lead to the next week's storyline. So some weeks you wrestle.
Yeah.
Some weeks you do the storytelling. There's also a huge comedic, ridiculous, preposterous side to it as well, which is something I've always been attracted to also.
Yeah.
I can go have the 5-star match, and I can also do a song and dance routine.
He's breaking down that psychology. This is stuff that we all know as wrestling fans, but to somebody on the outside, it's almost like a revelation when they get that extra added layer of this is the why behind the what, you know? It's not, oh, we're going out to pretend we're beating each other up. It's like we're telling a story here. Yeah, and it was fascinating listening to Chris kind of lay that out. And Marc was engaged, and he was actively participating, and he had his marquee producer there to help him along, but Marc was actively like he was trying to learn more about this, and he would ask whys, and this is what made this so fascinating. And this led to his next interview that he did with the owner of AEW, Mr. Tony Khan, everybody's favorite promoter, right? Booker of the Year, 2 years running. But this was a fascinating part of the interview as well, where Maron was kind of trying to dive into the promoter part of professional wrestling and kind of how that works. And that's what he was getting out of Tony. Check out this clip.
I really wanted to work in sports my whole life, and I've had this great opportunity for over a decade to do it now. My dad, his dream was to buy a football team. And just like I think my dream was to launch a wrestling promotion. And so I got to be a part of that. And for 11 seasons now, I've worked in the NFL and been working on football stats, which is something else I really love.
Wait, so your dad owns a team?
Yeah, my dad owns the Jacksonville Jaguars.
You're doing that as well?
Well, I do football statistics and put together scouting reports based on data and put together information on the draft and our games for the coach and for the general manager. I do that. Also, I'm the general manager and sporting director of Fulham Football Club in the Premier League.
Yeah.
So
that's in the UK. So he's literally he's got a team in Europe, a team in Jacksonville, Florida, and this National Wrestling Federation.
So now is the wrestling like a hobby?
No, not at all. It's a full-time thing. It's like I juggle all this work, but I really love it. And
who does all the writing?
I put the matches together, and I try to work with all the different wrestlers to put their stories together. So I don't hand them scripts. I think that's one of the things that makes the two shows really different. There's writers, and including people like a lot of people that are names in Hollywood have written for WWE, and it's great. And I think, like Brendan said, it's just a different feel of show because you're more likely to get handed a script. When Chris Jericho, who you just talked to earlier today, came to AEW, he told me, he was saying, this is really trippy because I haven't done an interview without a script in 20 years.
It was funny that he asked if this was just a hobby because that's what, like a Cornette listener, for example, right? That's their impression of Tony Khan is this is just his fun. And look, it is. I shouldn't even just say a Cornette listener. Yes, I think Tony sees it as a serious business, but at the end of the day, it's play money, and he's just playing. Like, he doesn't actually care if he wants this to succeed. I'm not saying he doesn't, but does he actually care? The end of the day, or is it just more about having fun doing it, right? So it was fascinating hearing Marc kind of pick his brain on those aspects of it. But that was one of the better Tony Khan interviews. It was shorter, but I highly, like I said, I'm going to keep saying that, I highly recommend you go listen to this because it was one of the more fascinating Tony Khan interviews, and Tony's really good at spewing numbers and trying to put over storylines and all that silly stuff that he always does. But this is one of the I guess just that outside of wrestling perspective brain trying to figure out the why, and not figure out just the why, but figure out the why from Tony Khan. Like, why, how, what, when. This is where you've seen the Cornette clip, I'm sure, where he's talking about flipping the notebook over. That came from this interview as well. I promise you just need to go listen to it. It's very fascinating. But it didn't stop there. He interviewed a couple other people, which I didn't pull a clip from everything. He interviewed Bryce Remsburg to get the referee perspective of it. And he interviewed some other clown I don't remember the name of. Doesn't matter. But then we got into an interview with his somebody I think he became fast friends with, ironically, and this one was interesting too, with MJF, as it appears that Maron was Maron was smartened up that MJF is going to be in character, but he wasn't smartened up that he needs to put that over with everybody else. He should have been like, and this next guy was a real fucking asshole. But, the first thing that they led with was, and then this next guy, he told us right before we hit record that, okay, I'm going to be the biggest asshole you've ever met, okay? So we're going to be in character once we hit record. I really wish that Maron hadn't said that, but here you go. Here's how that one played out in a little bit from MJF.
Then we went backstage to the Forum Club to have where there was a kind of sitting area so that we could sit and do some of the interviews, and that was with Max MJF, who is the champion, and we knew he was going to come in and do basically a gimmick interview, in character interview.
It's funny though, he's talking normal.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so this is going to stop right when we go on. He's like, oh yeah, I'm going to be the biggest douchebag Jew from Long Island that you ever met.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, when you do this, when you do the matches, I mean, you got bits you do, right?
Bits?
Well, I mean, what do you call them?
I'll bite people from now and then, but if only
I mean,
it's necessary.
when you chart it out, you know what you're going to open with mostly. Like, as a comic,
Personally,
yeah,
I'm a shoot from the hip type of guy.
Yeah. Oh, really?
I say what I'm feeling. I feel what I'm saying.
But I mean, like with moves, like with actual wrestling.
With the moves, when I'm in there, I have to study my opponent, study their movement, figure out what openings I have.
Yeah.
Is their arm hurt? Is their fucking finger hurt? Is their knee hurt?
Yeah, and that's where you.
Then you got to go for it.
Do you ever use weaponry?
So you're not going to tell anybody this,
No,
right?
I'm not.
All right, thank God. So sometimes, if I'm a little worried, I have a ring that I put in my trunks.
Yeah.
And I put it on my pinky.
Yeah.
And I punch the guy out with it when the ref's not looking.
All right.
And it works every time. Marc.
Yeah.
Every time.
So you cheat.
What?
I mean, that's
What are you
part
talking
of it.
about? I think I slightly bend the rules.
All right.
To my advantage.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We have to.
You have to.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to get hurt.
How was your bar mitzvah? Was it good?
Oh, Maximania? Are you kidding me?
Funny enough, I think they bonded, though. I think MJF, I think Maron has a respect for MJF. I think maybe just because of the mutual Jewish heritage, perhaps, and they kind of bonded over that, as you heard. But I think, Maron learned a lot from MJF on the showbiz perspective, too, and how these guys work in and out of character, even during interviews and that sort of thing. And, Maron was kind of almost playing along a little bit too obviously, and I just wish that people, MJF, instead of telling the guy, I'm going to be the biggest asshole you've ever seen in this interview, it would be nice if MJF was just the biggest asshole he's ever seen, so Maron could say, yeah, I had a great time other than that MJF guy, what a dick he was. You know what I mean? And that's how you're supposed to do it, but nobody gave him the memo. And so, at least we never see or hear MJF break character. I think there is a video floating around out there following him around on the indies or whatever, but we don't count that. Nothing's been put out since he's been on our national TVs. But another great reason to go check out this interview, and it taught Marc Maron more about the business. Like I said, just, what a heel is, especially, he got to see it in action, and just it was beautiful. The way that wrestlers are able to work their character into real life, it's fantastic. But we were not done yet. There was yet a fourth interview, if you will. This one was with Eddie Kingston. And this one came off of, there was several months ago, Eddie Kingston had a really big article published about him, talking about like his hard times coming up. And this is something that got on the radar of, I think Marc Maron had even said he read that back in the day, but certainly his producer was a big fan of Eddie Kingston, so that was one they wanted to wrangle in. And this was a fascinating interview as well, where we really got to dive in to Eddie Kingston coming up, and what kind of rough times that he had, and especially something that he does now when he goes back out on the indies that it just fucking will melt your heart. Check out this clip.
And how did you get this gig? I mean, how did you?
I talked a lot of shit. I had an independent show finally.
Yeah. After COVID.
Out in New York, after COVID. And I just grabbed the microphone one day and I said, hey, Cody Rhodes had a thing going here.
Yeah.
Open challenge.
Yeah.
So I said, hey, Cody, all these guys that you're fighting are kids. I'm a grown man.
Yeah.
All this stuff. And then it caught wind on Twitter.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I was like, okay. And then they called me in and they were like, oh, we want to bring you in to wrestle Cody. And the first question I asked was, how much? How much are we getting?
Yeah.
Because the way I didn't look at it like I was getting a contract.
Right.
I didn't look at it as a tryout.
You just saw it like a one-nighter?
Yeah. I looked at it like, okay, man, I can pay my mortgage next month, so I'm good to go.
But they signed you.
Yeah. Yeah, I got lucky. I had a good dance partner with Cody, and we beat each other up. And 2 weeks later, they were like, hey, you want a contract? I go, yeah, how much?
And how many matches you do in a week?
Oh, for AEW? It's once a week on a Wednesday.
You don't go out at...
Oh, no, I do. I like doing the independents still.
Yeah.
Because without the independents, I would have went nuts years ago.
So you just like it to do the shows?
Yeah. And a lot of times... well, they already announced it a couple times. I hate it when they do this. I usually will go there and do a show, but I'll tell them take half my money and give it to a charity that's local.
Right.
And like I tell them not to announce it, just do it.
Yeah.
And they announced it anyway. So yeah, that's what I like to do.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, really? I'm like, look, you guys kept me fed for years.
Right.
And I had nothing, so let me help you back out.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
I don't like being nice, but it happens once in a while.
Well,
yeah, so if you needed any more proof that Eddie was like a real street guy and a real good fucking human being, look no further than that clip right there. That's fantastic. Half of his fucking indie fee goes to benefit some local charity. You know, that's such a good dude. And that's something, like he says, that he doesn't really talk about much. You know, it comes out. People will say it. I actually hadn't heard it, so he probably could have kept his mouth shut on that one. But he had said in the interview that, you know, that somebody else, whoever, one of the indie promoters basically went on social media and talked about that Eddie did that. So apparently that was a public thing. But what a fucking guy, right? What a dude. And, you know, giving back, especially when, you know, I'm sure Eddie's not a millionaire or anything, you know, he's not set for life necessarily. He's only had that big contract for a couple years. So, but he still finds it in himself to give back. So that's fantastic. And then, you know, just to kind of wrap this segment up here with all these clips, I just thought this was such a fascinating piece of work, piece of journalism, to be honest. This was podcast journalism at its finest. This was a guy, Marc Maron, who knew about wrestling, talked to wrestlers, worked on a wrestling show, but never really thought much more of it than that fake wrestling stuff. And really got a deep dive education in on it, from going to a show, seeing it live, talking to the wrestlers, talking to the promoter, talking to good guys, talking to bad guys, getting an explanation on the psychology of why we do what we do, and then seeing it in action. And just, man, and you know, another thing he was so surprised with in the podcast is he looked at these guys like sports guys were like he always pictured like a MMA locker room or a football locker room where guys are getting psyched up and banging on lockers and just being meatheads. And he's like, no, this was more like going backstage at theater. People are getting into character. They're getting dressed. They're practicing. They're rehearsing. They're going over their stuff last minute. And, you know, he learned so much from just watching the guys in the ring before the show. You know, he talked about how he caught a glimpse of the Young Bucks practicing their fucking ladder match. They're going over their ladder spots in the ring before the show. All of this, it's just a fascinating look at professional wrestling. And Marc Maron, like I said, his podcast is not small potatoes. For him to give pro wrestling that spotlight and expose those kind of details to that many listeners, potential, you know, lapsed fans, new fans, all of that in between. It's just really a remarkable piece of podcast work. So if you are a wrestling fan, seek that out. That's WTF with Marc Maron. And it's just, I don't remember what it's titled, but just fucking a deep dive into AEW. You'll absolutely love it. Hey, thanks for checking out that clip. Don't forget to check out other clips here on the channel. And while you're there, throw a like, throw a subscribe. And don't forget to check out full episodes each and every Sunday of the Pro Wrestling Podcast.